Howdy, folks. Radical Russ, your red state refugee here. And I got to take a second to rant about how Democrats must make fairness the issue in the 2024 campaign. This comes to me from a piece I had read in Politico following the Supreme Court's overturning of affirmative action in that case with Harvard University. And the piece reads Democrats in Congress teed off on the Supreme Court's decision this week gutting affirmative action. Just don't expect them to do a whole lot about it. That attitude reflects the fatalism with which many in the party have come to view the Supreme Court's conservative tilt. Even if they controlled both chambers of Congress and the White House, Democrats lack the 60 Senate votes that are necessary to realistically promise action on reversing controversial landmark decisions on issues like abortion, affirmative action, and student loans. And this is what I was getting at online the other day when I was having a discussion with someone about the 2024 election. They're saying we need to vote really big Democrat. We need to give Joe Biden big wins so that he can enact his agenda and reverse these terrible Supreme Court decisions. And so I'm always asking, okay, how big? How big a win? Do we need like a 57, 58, 59, 60 seat Senate like Barack Obama had in 2009 and 2010 when there was always a Joe Lieberman to show up and mess everything up? And they kind of deflect on that point and say, yeah, vote big, vote big. It's like, okay, what? How big? So you tell us to vote big for Democrats. And in the meantime, you've got Joe Biden tamping down calls to expand the Supreme Court. That's the only reasonable way we're ever going to fix this issue in my lifetime. Because the chance that Justice Thomas and Justice Alito die at the same time the Democrats hold the White House and the Senate is pretty slim, without either one of them strategically retiring while a Republican holds the White House. And don't expect the Democrats to pull a McConnell seat theft either. Heck, in that situation, they'd probably help a Republican POTUS find an acceptable moderate. Now, I know the bill to increase the Supreme Court would face the same 60-vote Senate hurdle, but at least then the Democrats would be forcing the issue and appear to be fighting for the women, the gays, and the blacks who've lost their rights during this 6-3 court, people who have always voted reliably Democratic, and then keep hearing, we need to vote more Democratic. And they got to be thinking, shit, we did vote Democratic. Now, look, I know white women don't always vote Democratic, but my point is, the women who did vote Democratic and who have now been declared broodmares for the state if they live in a red state, they can't be motivated by more vote Dem. We saw the end of Roe v. Wade coming for months, even before the leak of the draft decision. And then when it did come out, we saw Democrats scrambling, acting as if they were surprised it was going to happen. It's not a surprise anymore. This has been going on for decades. Folks like me grew up watching the Democratic Party getting pummeled by Ronald Reagan in the 1980s, 2 straight electoral bloodbaths. And how did the Democrats respond once they did get back into the power, back into the White House? Well, they incarcerated the black base with Biden's drug war in the 1980s and Biden's crime bill in the 1990s. They sold out the worker base with NAFTA during the Clinton administration and the welfare administration, both things that Biden supported in the 90s as a senator. They betrayed the youth base by sending them to wars in the desert based on lies that Biden and the Democrats went along with in the 2000s. Betrayed them again by making their student debt immune to bankruptcy in a bill that Joe Biden wrote. They abandoned their LGBT base by tiptoeing around Don't Ask, Don't Tell and Defense of Marriage Act and civil unions in the 90s and the 2000s. They let the Republicans steal a Supreme Court seat and allow the Russians to boost Trump in the 2010s while Biden was vice president. So a lot of us here would relish going on the offense for once. You know what? If President Joe Biden was reelected and just promised to undo everything Senator Joe Biden and Vice President Joe Biden fought for, we'd be ecstatic. But why should we vote Democratic when their leaders take abolishing the filibuster, expanding the Supreme Court, and ending the Electoral College off the table? Every Democratic agenda item fails when a minority Senate and a supermajority Supreme Court can nix it all. And really, do you think if the situation were reversed, the Republicans wouldn't hesitate to pack the court from 6-3 liberal to 7-6 conservative? Republicans seem to understand gaming the system in a way that the Democrats just don't. They figured out that they could lock in the conservative Supreme Court. They could keep it that way by McConnelling the rules. They can protect it with a Senate filibuster, and they can enhance it occasionally with a popular vote loser chosen by the Electoral College. With all that set, they don't even have to compete on ideas and policy anymore. But do Democrats push the unfairness of this to the voters? No, it's more vote for more of us so we can work in the system where 41 Republican senators and 6 Republican justices can undo the efforts that we are trying to undo the last president that didn't get the popular vote because of the Electoral College. I mean, let's take the Electoral College, please. Here's something that has gifted us the 2 worst presidents in modern history, who both lost their initial elections, popular votes, and then ushered in climate change, unlimited electoral bribery, regular gun massacres, our longest war, and cemented in that 6-3 Supreme Court that's undone 60 years of precedent in taking away constitutional rights from female, gay, and minority people. Now, remember when Bush v. Gore happened in 2000, and everyone was so upset about that the guy who lost by 500,000 votes actually got to become president? And you remember when Trump was elected and he lost by 3 million votes, but then he won because of the Electoral College? So you remember when Democrats lost those 2 elections for president, even though they actually won them by the most popular votes? So then they went and they held these televised hearings on a constitutional amendment to abolish the Electoral College. Remember that? I think it happened when Obama had a 60-seat Senate, right? Or maybe after Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats clawed back the House in that 2018 wave election. You remember those televised hearings? Of course you don't, because when Democrats had the power, they introduced bills to abolish the Electoral College, but then let them die in committee without a single hearing. In 2009 and 2010, with 58% control of both the House and the Senate, they introduced bills in the House and the Senate to abolish the Electoral College. They got 0 co-sponsors and 0 hearings. With Barack Obama's big mandate, huge Senate lead, huge House lead, we can't bother to talk about the Electoral College now. In 2019 and 2020, after again that wave election of 2018 that repudiated Donald Trump, we got that 54% House majority. Once again, there was a bill to abolish the Electoral College. And this time, at least it did get 2 Senate co-sponsors and 11 House co-sponsors, but 0 hearings. Meanwhile, did you hear that one time there was an attack on an embassy in Benghazi? See, Democrats will see an issue critical to its base, like abolishing the Electoral College. They'll mention it once on a Sunday show. Then the Republicans will react fiercely to it. And then the Democrats will back off and say, oh, the voters just aren't ready. Meanwhile, Republicans will see an issue critical to their base, like, let's say, Benghazi, and they'll blast it out on their massive multimedia network that its donors fund at 150 decibels, 24/7 on repeat until it's driven into everybody's skull. The Democratic messaging should be that we are permanently fucked on climate change, civil rights, gun reform, addressing homelessness, ending the drug war, healthcare for all, etc., unless we end the filibuster, expand the Supreme Court, and abolish the Electoral College. These are the triple pillars of minority white supremacy rule, and they're all part of one winning issue: fairness. Democrats, be the party of democracy. Go all in on the party of fairness. Elect us, and we'll fight to make the system fair. I mean, shit, fairness is the cloak Republicans always don when they're striking down someone's rights. Oh, it's not fair that the hypothetical Christian web designer has to build sites for gay weddings. It's not fair that people who have already paid their student loans should have to pay for other people's. It's not fair that some kid gets into Legacy University just because he's black. It's not fair that my daughter has to race against a trans girl. It's not fair to keep parents out of the loop on their child's sex identity, sexual orientation, or womb baby. It's not fair. Well, go political jujitsu for once and use their longing for fairness against them. You want fairness, but you support a Senate where the losers can stop the winners? You want fairness, but support a Supreme Court that isn't bound by the rules every other court must follow? You want fairness, but you won't expand the court to undo appointments made by cheaters and losers so it actually represents what the people want? You want fairness, but you support an electoral college that lets vote losers win? Frame it as winners and losers. They believe to the victor belong the spoils, so use it against them. They support political affirmative action for losers. They are the party of participation trophies. They are the party of snowflakes. They are the ones who need government help to get by. Vote more Democratic without addressing this fairness issue is pissing in the wind. Everybody who did vote Democratic is losing their rights unfairly. Those who don't vote see Democrats who can't succeed because of unfairness, so why bother? Those who vote third party are protesting that voting Democrat got us where we are because of unfairness. And if my values can't win because Democrats won't tackle fairness, at least I'll have a clear conscience voting for someone who would fight for me if she could. I believe Bernie Sanders got the traction he did because he was relentless in his messaging about the 1%, which is at its core a message about fairness. He educated voters about a system that is patently unfair and illustrated that Democrats are complicit in maintaining this unfairness. I mean, Nancy Pelosi stock trades, anyone? I believe Hillary Clinton failed to beat an obviously unfit, mobbed up criminal con man, serial lying rapist, reality TV star traitor because she embodied that neoliberal, don't buck the system Democrats who sold us out in her husband's administration. And by the way, I don't care how much rat fucking the FBI did, how much CNN sanitized Trump, how long Bernie stayed in, or the fuckery of the Electoral College. When you get your 3-decade experienced first lady slash senator slash secretary of state candidate beat by that guy, while your party holds a popular, successful 2-term incumbency, you just really suck at politics. These days, politics is a bit like cosmology. We can measure all the matter in the universe, but gravity behaves in a way that suggests the existence of dark matter we can't see. So too, we can take all the polls of the American voters, but politics behaves in a way that suggests the existence of dark votes we don't see. And those dark votes are capital. When you think of Democrats and Republicans fighting for what the people want, none of this makes sense. The Republicans clearly fight against what the people want, and Democrats clearly don't fight hard enough to change the system so they could fight for what people want. But when you see politics as Democrats and Republicans fighting for what capital wants, it becomes crystal clear. GOP wants a hierarchy so the top can scoop up all the money. Democrats want diversity so there's more money from more people to scoop up. But it's always about scooping up the money. For instance, codifying Roe v. Wade into law during Obama's 60-seat Senate would have done something the people want. But he had other priorities. Unspoken among them was that the sword of Damocles hanging over Roe v. Wade was always a great Democratic fundraiser. What do the people want on the triple pillars of minority white supremacy rule? On expanding the Supreme Court, most Democrats and independents agree, especially in strong Democratic-based demographics. In a Marquette Law School poll, 51% of respondents said they either strongly or somewhat favored increasing the number of justices on the Supreme Court, versus 49% who were strongly or somewhat opposed. Expansion was supported by 51% of independents, 72% of Democrats, and just 27% of Republicans. Expanding the court was favored by 63% of Black respondents, 61% of Hispanic respondents, 60% of those under age 45, 60% of women, and 56% of the poor. Clearly, the Democrats' base supports expanding the Supreme Court, but Joe Biden doesn't, so that suggests to me that Capitol doesn't either. And on ending the Senate filibuster, more Americans strongly oppose it than strongly support it, but most people don't know very much about it. Why is that? Here is an impediment to the Democratic agenda, and yet we do not have Democrats 24/7 pounding into people's skull the unfairness of the Senate filibuster and the need to abolish it. But when we ask Democrats, just Democrats, 56% oppose the Senate filibuster. The numbers are actually 34% strong support, or 34% support, 36% oppose, and 29% not sure. Almost a third of the country has no idea that there's a Senate filibuster standing in the way of progress. And then on abolishing the Electoral College, this one's a slam dunk. Almost 2/3 of all Americans agree, and 80% of Democrats think we need to abolish the Electoral College. And again, Democrats don't attack the Electoral College, the Senate filibuster, and expanding the Supreme Court, I guess because Capitol doesn't want them to, because clearly the people do. And if they're not getting that message loud and clear, it's time we start sending that message loud and clear to the Democratic Party. Unless you do something to address the systemic unfairness of our federal politics, there's no point in supporting Democrats who will be powerless to do anything else. So Democrats, please make fairness the issue. I'm Radical Russ, and that's the rant.